we didn't even have the time to think about what we wanted, because you go to college, you get married, you buy a house, have a kid, and you just follow this routine. And we were just like, well, I guess we're just gonna work the rest of our lives to pay for this house. And then now that we know that there's other options out there, it's like I have to share. I just feel like I have to share, because it's like, you don't have to be miserable. You don't have to work a job. Find your passion, follow your bliss, and money will follow.
Welcome to the Sustainable Living Podcast. Tips, tools, and tactics for living a heart-centered life that honors Mother Earth and her inhabitants. The information shared on the Sustainable Living Podcast reflects the opinions of host Marian West, Janice Friant, and their guests. Please use your own discretion and research before applying any information to your individual situation. Now, here are your hosts, Marian and Janice.
Hello, everyone. This is Marianne, and I'm your host for today. I have a question for you. Would you live in a 325 square foot tiny home with a husband and a child and a dog and a cat? Well, Emily Gerde, and I hope I pronounced her last name right, is doing just that. And guess what? They started out in a 2,000 square foot home, reduced down to 325 square feet, and found out that whole process was so addicting that they're going to go even smaller. Can you believe it? And why are they doing it? And the answer, as Emily is going to tell us during this interview, is freedom. They found freedom from debt. They found freedom from having to work jobs which didn't feed their souls. They found freedom from even taking care of stuff. You know, a 2,000 square foot home can hold a lot of stuff. And when we have stuff, we have to take care of it. And so many more benefits in living in a small space. So, without further ado, here is Emily telling us their journey from moving from a 2,000 square foot home to a 325 square foot tiny home. And now they're going to go even tinier. And so many things have happened for them. You will be really enjoying their story. So, hey, I'm so glad, Emily, that you could come on the podcast. And I have been, you're welcome. I've been stalking you a little bit. So I know that, not in a bad way, in a good way, you know, because I want to always find out who is my guest, who am I talking to. And so Emily is in the tiny house movement, you know, we could say that. And I'm seeing that there's changes coming up since we started to talk. Maybe first you can talk about the tiny house you built. Let's start out. Why did you want to move into a tiny house?
Yes, I appreciate you asking. I love telling this story because I know a lot of people are in the same boat with our family. I was working 2 jobs. I had an infant at home, and my husband was working full-time, and he was in grad school. And we were just miserable. We had this 2,000 square foot home. And, you know, I felt like I never was actually in it. I was just always working or trying to clean and not actually enjoying this beautiful property we had. So as my health actually started to fail me, because I was up late and, you know, trying to keep up with 2 jobs and an infant, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. So I got introduced by my sister-in-law to the tiny house movement, and I was instantly hooked. It was like this big light went off, like, oh my gosh, I don't have to live in this huge house and clean all day long. This is great.
Great point. Cleaning. Ooh. And right? Yeah, and the bigger your house gets, the more surfaces are collecting dust, right? This is crazy. You had a baby, which is a full-time job in itself. I mean, it's a 24/7, very demanding job, and you were working 2 jobs. Wow.
Well, I was running a daycare in our basement. So I was home with him all day, luckily, but with 10 other children.
Yeah, no, wow, that's one of the hardest jobs ever. But I still do a bit, but I was taking care of my grandson in a pretty full-time manner. And I was exhausted by the end of the day. And I have friends switch to daycares and they say, well, why don't you start a daycare? You already have all the toys.
Oh.
I'm like, no way. That's way too hard. That's so much work. Wow, that's amazing. So you got introduced to the tiny house idea.
Yeah, it was so not by chance. I'm a big believer things happen for a reason. So turns out that a former colleague of mine when I used to be a teacher lives in a tiny house.
Oh.
So I was like, hey, can we come visit? And I'm a big believer if you want to start downsizing your home, I would definitely step into a tiny house or a smaller home and feel it out. My husband and I walked in there and we were like, oh, you know what? We can totally do this. Like, this is totally manageable. And we were really surprised and excited about it. So we actually found our contractor right away and we started building August of 2015. And our home was completed May of 2017. And we've been living in it ever since.
You said you started in 15.
It took a year to build.
Yeah, wow. Who would have thought that a tiny house takes that long to build? You said a couple of interesting things. So you found a contractor. So you decided not to undertake it yourself, right?
Yeah, because like I was saying at the time, I was working 2 jobs. My husband was working and in grad school. And honestly, we barely got our storm door on. So we are not qualified.
Yeah. Totally gets it. Was it difficult to find a contractor or were you able to get it as a referral? How did that work for you?
Yeah, my sister-in-law had seen them on the local news and we just went over there and visited him and toured one of his tiny houses and we just loved his work. It's pretty much him by himself. He's got a couple helpers now because we were on HGTV, Tiny House Big Living. So they actually filmed our entire build.
Wow.
So he got really popular. So he's now got a couple helpers. But at the time, it was pretty much just him. And I loved it. We got to customize it. Our house on the TV show was called the Tiny Birch House because we have a lot of live birch wood. We wanted to bring the forest into our house. So that was such a blessing.
Yeah, I have seen pictures of that. It looks so beautiful. How did you get on TV? How did you manage to do that, to be part of the show?
I emailed around when we started building this tiny house. Kind of at the time, the tiny house movement was mainly young adults or people who were retired. So I was kind of on this mission of I wanted to show families, and especially families with young children, that this is possible. Sustainable living is possible and it's affordable. And we wanted to show that you don't have to just hodgepodge things together. You can live in luxury. Because I think a lot of people are turned off by the tiny house movement because they think of, a mobile home or an RV. And we wanted to show them like, this is possible. You can still have everything you want from your big house in a more sustainable package.
You emailed them and they said, great, we need somebody like you who is crazy enough to go into a tiny house with a little kid and you have dogs and cats too, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, they were so excited.
You designed your house yourself or did you hire an architect or how did that come about?
Well, in the tiny house community, there's a gentleman named Andrew Morrison and he's kind of one of the pioneers. We purchased his plans and then adapted them to fit our needs. Our contractor was able to follow his plans but then adjust it because Andrew Morrison is just him and his wife in this home and we needed something to sustain. We were going to live in this tiny house forever. And we are actually so addicted to tiny living that we are going to build a smaller tiny home.
How big is your current tiny home?
It's 325 square feet, which is the average size of the American, living room these days.
Really? Is that what a living room is? So you're going to get smaller. And I think we need to talk about that a lot more too. But let's first go back to this build. You said you wanted to live with the luxuries you like in your life. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? What are the luxuries?
Yeah, well, for us, we really wanted a non-toxic home, which is another benefit. I think a lot of people are like, oh, why didn't you just get an RV? And actually, while we're building our smaller tiny home, in Colorado, we will be living in an RV. RVs are extremely toxic, and you can do a lot of research. Formaldehyde, all the glues, the vinyl flooring, they're made cheaply, and I understand. And we actually found a company, Evergreen RVs, and we found they're semi-non-toxic, but they actually, of course, went out of business because it was too expensive for them to compete with the toxic RVs. So we actually are going to be in a mobile home for a little bit, but with a tiny house, you get lots more insulation. We made ours non-toxic. We have a water filter. We have a half dishwasher. We have a 3/4 size fridge freezer. We have an oven, a 4-burner stove top. We have wood burning stove. We have an AC heat split unit so that we can set the temp just like a normal home, especially here in Minnesota. Summers, it can get really humid. And in winters, we don't want to be up in the middle of the night adding our wood to the stove, so the heat just kicks on. We have a full-size shower, and we have a washer-dryer combo. The big part, everyone always talks about the toilet, right? We have a composting toilet, and I can tell you, I hope eventually the whole world does composting toilets. It's just so much more sustainable. You're not using clean drinking water. I understand there's a whole sanitation feature to that, but I think, with our technology, I'm sure we can come up with something. And I'm sure you've heard of humanure. Now they're finding ways to use human waste as a compost, obviously not food, but it is a resource that can be tapped. And there's even cars run on human waste.
It's funny that you say now, because human manure was used for a long, long time to fertilize crops and edible crops too. And actually, Kellogg's used to have human manure in their product. And then they, like maybe 10 years ago, got so much pressure because people are so freaked out about the idea, which is crazy because, well, I live close to the ocean. And the sewer system constantly has spills. And so untreated raw sewage ends up in the ocean and people go swim in it. To me, it's like,
Right.
Yeah, a composting toilet or using the human byproducts of living to then create more food would make so much more sense. But there, like you said, there is this ick factor, right? And that's what people have around composting toilets as well. But there are lots of different options now. What do you feel like, since it's a compost and it's a toilet issue and people are always so interested about that, how much actually labor does it take for you a day to take care of your toilet needs? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's actually it's really useful. The urine and the solids are separate. That makes it on purpose so that you can empty it less. So the urine we have to empty, every 3 or 4 days. And my son and I homeschool, so my son and I are home quite a bit. I mean, we're out doing adventures, but we're home for more than the average family. And then the solids, we've only had to change like once a month on average. We just have coconut coir in there. Some people use peat moss or wood shavings, but coconut coir is the most sustainable. And it actually doesn't mold as easily. So we've had a lot of luck with that. And I understand the ick factor. I do. But, as a mom, you're changing diapers. We have cats. We're changing litter. It's like human litter. And actually, you don't touch it at all. You literally put the bag over it and dump it out. And that's it. And once we get our own property, we will be doing human manure. We just currently aren't on our own property.
So right now, it just goes to the landfills.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it's still probably a lot less than if you were to flush it down into a sewer system,
right?
On a regular basis. Definitely. Thank you for that we had that little segue into the poop world.
Right. It's an untapped resource.
It certainly is. And it's so funny how people have such a weird relationship. But I think that's an extension of the weird relationship a lot of us have with our bodies and body functions. And, it's going deep when you really want to talk about what's going on here. So we could talk about it for a long time, but let's go back to the tiny house. So you bought the plans, you found your contractor, and is your house on a piece of land or is it somewhat movable?
It's on a 3-axle trailer, so it is portable. Actually, we didn't realize we would fall in love with traveling so much. So, I mean, it's 16,000 pounds. So we do have to hire out to have it moved, and we've moved it 3 times already. It's been great, but we do want to downsize so that our own truck can pull it. So that's why we're going to build one half the size and half the weight so that we could pull it. It'll be our home, but it'll also be like our RV at the same time.
Yes, that you're more flexible. Did you choose to have it mobile because you thought you might want to go to different places, or did it have to do with permitting in your area?
Actually, having it mobile makes it more difficult to get yourself some property. We just did it because we thought we'd want to move it every 5 to 10 years, and then it turned out we want to move all the time. So
things you learn, right? As
yes.
you get started in new adventures. So in your areas, and getting a permit for a small house is easy or difficult? What would you say?
Here in Minnesota, it's not really catching on quite yet. We were looking to buy property out of the cities. I'm actually speaking in one of our suburbs. They're trying to get the accessory dwellings okayed in their city, which would be, they call them granny pods, or, so that you could have something in your backyard. Mm-hmm. It's moving. And actually, I just met a gentleman. He's a superintendent of a school in our area, and he's trying to build a tiny house community in another suburb. We tried to get a tiny house community started here, and we just hit so much red tape. And, my husband and I, we're more like liberal artsy. We don't know enough about codes and zoning, and, we're just very free spirits. So we actually are moving to Colorado to work with people to start a tiny house community there because there's a lot less red tape.
That's interesting because Colorado, for those of us which are interested in water harvesting, they have a lot of red tape around that, So you almost think they have red tape around all the building stuff. But that's good to know, because I think a lot of people have the intention to live more conscious and use less space and be friendlier to the environment. And then you run into building codes and red tape, and suddenly you can't do it. And you're stuck with a 2,000 square foot home because that's the only thing you're allowed to build there.
And I think what I've been explaining to a lot of the county commissioners and people I've been talking to is, look, this movement's coming, whether you like it or not. So you can either be on the forefront of it and work with people and come up with codes that you're okay with, or people are just going to hide it and do it anyway, which is what's happening. So I always try to say, although I'm a big believer in freedom and you have your own land, you get to do what you want with it, but I also understand about health regulations and everything. So a lot of the tiny house community, including myself, we're willing to comply. I'm happy to meet your standards. You just have to set them, and we can work together to make it work. So for example, our home is currently not certified. You can get an RV certification, and there's one other type of certification. I can't remember. But for example, we couldn't have our wood burning stove to be RV certified, but to us, that was a better option for us because we thought if we had our own property, we could chop down any wood that's fallen, or we would be more sustainable off the grid type of situation. And that's another issue, is a lot of the tiny house community wants to be off the grid. And of course, the cities, especially near big cities, well, we want you on our grid. We want you paying for our electricity and our water. And here we are like, hey, what about my solar panels and my composting toilet? And,
Right. Well, I think part of it too is fear. Not everybody is conscientious about their actions. And
right.
If you have untreated sewage just sitting around, that can create a big problem. And people fear anything different. And this is different from what we are used to now. So the first reaction is usually no. And especially in an environment where everybody is so happy. I'm sure the city officials are just like, ooh, if we let this go and something happens, we are liable. So it's just looking for safety. But then the more people are doing it, the more it becomes obvious, yes, it's normal and it can be done beautifully and it's a solution. I live in San Diego, where housing is a huge problem. Right now, just the city of San Diego has 5,000 homeless, and that doesn't count all the people which are couch surfing or not obvious homeless because maybe they live in their cars and have a driveway to park in and stuff like that. And a lot of it is that there's no affordable housing available. It's just not there. You want to rent a house and it's $2,400, and a lot of people don't even make that in a month. And tiny homes are definitely a solution, but there's also red tape too.
And I spoke with a builder because I asked, why aren't we building smaller homes? Like, why? I don't want a 2,000 square foot home. I had that, and we were only using our upstairs, and it still felt big for us. And he said that what's happening is it's actually cheaper. You see these developments going up, and it's cheaper for them to build a big home that's cookie cutter than to make these smaller homes. It doesn't make sense, but just the way the system's set up, he said it's actually cheaper to build the bigger home. And I was sort of like heartbroken, yes, for now, but that's just because that's the way the system is set up. Of course, we can make it more affordable if we just change our thinking. And there's obviously resources out there. And I listen to your Venus Project podcast, and I'm a big believer in the Venus Project. And I know there's other options out there. And I think we're at a turning point in our society where it's time to offer other choices. And I understand there's apartments and townhomes and things, but for us personally, our family, we can't have a non-toxic option. We don't know what they're putting on the lawn. We don't know what cleaning they're using in public spaces. We don't know the air quality. We don't, those sort of things, we can't live in those places. We are very sensitive to those things. So we want property. We want a little bit of yard to have our garden and our butterfly garden and vegetable garden and a place for our animals and chickens and whatnot. So there is a missing piece here of this new generation coming up and saying, you know what, I want a home, but I don't want the current system of these huge homes, small lots kind of picture that we have.
Absolutely. I think a lot of that too has to do with a value of a property is based on square footage of the home. So you might have a huge property with a small house, and it's just not worth as much as a small property with a huge house. And I'm all the way with you, especially here in California, where you basically can be outdoors all year around. To build these huge homes without yard doesn't make any sense to me, whatsoever. But it's interesting that you talked about apartments and things like that, because you're so almost helpless to what your neighbor does, even if they smoke, or there are some smoke-free apartments now. But of course, that would also be another alternative to shoot for, to have the non-toxic material apartments with agreements of what can be used in them. But yeah, so tiny homes, so a lot of people also do want to live in community. And it sounds to me that's one of your ideas too, but that you live in community where you have your own space and then common space, right?
Yes, I have. I already sketched it all up, and I actually use the Venus Project as a idea. I really want to build almost like a circle community, just as he did with all the community stuff in the middle, and then your lot sizes get bigger as it expands. And obviously, this would just be the very tiny top of the iceberg as far as his idea, but just to get people interested in that sort of community and just having a shared garden. And I know people do these things already, but I haven't seen it with tiny homes. There are some tiny home communities out there, but I really want it to be like a one-stop shop where you've got playground, a community center, you've got shared laundry, anything we can do to make it sustainable. And I'm even trying to get Tesla on board here. I know somebody who used to work at Tesla. So I'm like, hey, come on in, bring in your batteries, get us some solar panels up. And so I'm really excited. I've been looking at grants and things for live roofing. I think I can't remember the exact term for live roofing, but where the plants are on the roof.
Right.
Geothermal, and just really want to, throw it all out there. I think with my tiny house community, I find there are tiny home dwellers that, like us, all of a sudden are like, hey, wait a minute, I kind of want to move around a bit. So I think it'd be fun to have a network of tiny house communities where there's an understanding where some lots are for permanent individuals and some lots are for people who prefer to move. And that's the beauty of tiny houses on wheels, is you can do both. But again, as far as the city is concerned, they don't like that, because they're like, well, we want something that's there, that's valuable, that's going to stay. And I understand that. But at the same time, it's hard, right? You want to meet everyone's need. Just because some people want to be fluid and move from place to place doesn't mean all of a sudden everyone's going to get up and go. Some people want to stay where they are and stay grounded. So it's all very new to me and I'm learning, but I would like to have a community where there are choices to either stay or go on foundation, not on foundation, and just offer those opportunities. I'm looking for this niche of people who want to live small but still have that home feel.
Yeah, I'm sure there are quite a few. I mean, you do need some permanent people to be able to create a community. If everybody comes and goes all the time, that wouldn't work. But a lot of the communities do have rentals available, so people can come and stay for a while. Would you talk a little bit about your process of coming from 2,000 square foot, where I'm assuming you had stuff in your 2,000 square feet, to bringing it down to living comfortably in 325. And again, you're three people. One of them is a young child. And young kids tend to have a lot of requirements, space requirements, at least in our society. You know, it seems there's toys and diapers and, you know, stuff. So what did you do? How did you do it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I actually wrote about this in length in my book because I think there's so many ideas out there. You know, the minimalist movement is growing and I love it. And we didn't even know actually what the minimalist movement was at the time. We just knew we had to get rid of stuff. For us, the best thing was doing it in stages. I know now that there's a lot of people out there, 30-day challenge, which is great. But for me, that was stressful, because I had to learn how to detach myself from my possessions. And that was a big spiritual awakening for me, to realize the item doesn't hold the memory. I hold the memory. And it's such an epiphany to think, oh my gosh, just because I get rid of this artwork that I got in Kenya doesn't mean that the trip I took is gone. You know? But it feels like that at first. So going slow and steady was really important for us. We started by selling things on Facebook. And I know a lot of times there's this sort of like, oh, just donate. And I understand that. But I personally believe that abundance is abundance. And we eat 100% organic, non-GMO food. So our grocery bill is more a week than people spend in an entire month. So for us, I felt comfortable selling high quality things to people, especially almost all our stuff was non-toxic and everything. So we started by selling. Actually, it's kind of funny because all the stuff we sold the money ended up going to a company, a junk company, for the things that were all broken. And actually, when we bought our home, we had all this stuff that was just there, that was old metal, old chairs kind of thing. So we called a junk company. It was the only company we could find that recycled, you know, the recycling rate was like 75% or something really high. So all the money that we got from selling things actually just went to recycling all the junk. Once we got down to the trinkets, we started donating locally. Unfortunately, at the time, we weren't aware that Goodwill is not necessarily the best company, but at the time, it was a time crunch and we had to just get rid of furniture that nobody wanted. So now we have found more local options. So once we moved everything out of our larger home, we moved into my parents' basement, and there we actually started slowly downsizing one box at a time, because our home did take a year to build. It normally only takes 6 months, but we had so much custom design that it took longer. So we had a nice whole year to sift through our stuff and just slowly let go. And I know for some people, they prefer the quick, speedy way, which is great. But for us, I attached memories. Most of my stuff was memorabilia, so we got rid of that. We actually downsized again when we moved into our tiny house. As we were moving in, I was like, oh, just kidding. Like, this has no good place to be. So then that went as well. So definitely for us, that slow, steady pace was important. And we actually are still getting rid of stuff. I have stuff on sale right now. It's addicting. It's so freeing to not have something to maintain, to dust, to take care of. And our freedom has just exponentially expanded. We've traveled more in the last year than we ever have in our lives. We are taking care of ourselves. We're practicing self-care, mindful practices, all these things that we never had time for because we were always maintaining possessions and property.
So your 2,000 square foot home, you had purchased it, or were you renting?
We purchased it.
And then you sold it to be able to build your tiny home.
Yes.
That makes sense.
We got really lucky because we didn't have to take out a loan, because the sale of our home paid for the tiny house. So that's not normal. For most people, they're kind of starting with a loan.
Right. Yeah. But most people might not do as many custom builds like you do.
Yeah.
So it might not be
Exactly.
quite as expensive to build. We were talking about slow downsizing. To me, that's actually a really good tip because I downsized one time very fast and I found that I kept things. I have no idea why. And then I got rid of things where I'm like, no, I shouldn't have. If you have to make decisions really fast, sometimes you don't make really good decisions. And then, like you said, too, when you go into the new space, it becomes more clear, too, oh, this I actually don't really need, but this other thing I do. And the other question I had is, do you have a lot of hobbies which require equipment?
Yeah, we are big outdoors family. We had like tents and sleeping bags and bikes and a pull behind buggy for our son and snowshoes and skis and all that sort of thing. So we actually purchased a portable shed, just like a tarp shed. I can't remember what it's called, but that was great for all those kind of bikes, those bigger purchases. And then in our tiny house, under the floor, we have storage under the floor. So anything that's very seasonal goes under there for later use.
Yeah, you have some really nice videos on YouTube. So we definitely link to those so people can see them. I thought it was very well thought out. Not a lot of space, like 2,000 square feet, but a lot of space to put things, to be able to be very organized about it. Because I feel the smaller the space, the more you have to be organized. Things having a place. I find when things are organized that you have to move 3 items to get to the fourth item, that fourth item hardly ever gets put back into that place, you know? So you have to kind of work it out so that it's easy to keep that order up, right? Yeah, so I was also thinking, you know, some people have hobbies like, let's say, making quilt, where they have a lot of fabric to use in different projects, and that might be harder to downsize because this is you don't use all the time, but you come back to all the time. There might be also a little bit lifestyle specific, how small you can comfortably get.
We homeschool, so that was kind of like my hobby is I have actually probably 25-30% of our storage is designated to homeschool curriculum and art supplies and that sort of thing. So we did, and that's the beauty of tiny homes is you design it for your needs. So we actually have empty drawers now because we thought we would need more storage. And for example, for the homeschool stuff, I have hardly pulled it out because like you said, it kind of gets buried behind things. So that's when we downsize again here coming in a couple weeks, I'm excited because I can actually get rid, you think, oh, I bought it, right? So I have to keep it. I realized it's better to get it when we need it or borrow it or go to the library. There's so many resources, especially for homeschooling out there that are either free or extremely affordable. So I've let go of that. Well, I bought this, I need to keep it. So it's more, well, yeah, I have it, but I can't even use it because I can't even see that it's there. I have probably 1,000 color pencils. Well, not even a third of them are sharp. So why don't I downsize those and donate the rest to a school? Then I can always get more.
Yeah, certain things just accumulate and they probably never will get used up. Hardly anybody has used pencils to be like 1 inch, Right. So the days are kind of over because there's just so much around all the time. And how old is your son now?
He's 4 in December, so almost 4.
Kids find things to play with and to learn from everywhere. Nature is the biggest teacher. So, it's not like we need to buy all that stuff. Kids are just such learners, and the library system is amazing. That's actually a real good tip you're bringing up. Said so many things we don't have to own. You can have all the books you want by going to the library. And of course, now with the electronic stuff, you just have one little device and you can have millions of books if you choose, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because, you had mentioned toys before, and I forgot to say that my son at first, it was hard. It was hard for him. Luckily, he was young enough that he didn't really understand. Every once in a while, because when we first started this, he was 1.5. So he didn't really understand that, he might be like, where's my garbage truck? And we'd be like, oh gosh, I don't know. And of course now we explain to him, and now we have encouraged him that every time he wants a new toy, then we sell or donate another toy. So he's outgrown them anyway, right? So again, it's that thing of like, oh, I better keep this for my next kid. Well, my next kid might not like that toy, or I don't need to keep it around. And that's the beauty of the internet these days, is so many moms are catching on to this. Like, I don't need a brand new toy. I'm going to go get a used toy for half the price because my kid's going to play with it for 5 days and get bored with it. So that's been really helpful for us. And he's only has 4 of those cubby boxes full of toys. And like you said, everything else is outside. We do experiences. Instead of buying those toys, we use the money to go rock climbing, and he starts horseback riding next week, swimming, hiking, biking, all that. And that's where we put our money into.
Yeah, I think more parents are coming to sets that you don't need all the things, that experiences are much more important. So I heard you say you got inspired to downsize more by your travels. Is that correct? That you traveled and you realized you wanted to travel more?
Yeah, we actually purchased a 1988 camper, and it was so funny. We've just never been so happy. And it was only like 14 feet. I mean, it was maybe not even 100 square feet. And we'd never been happier. And my son had never been happier. And we felt silly because we had a tiny house and a camper. And I was like, well, this is silly. We were like, oh, it's our home base. And it's like, again, it's like we just want to be as simple as possible. And having a couple dishes, and you just learn like, oh, I don't need this stuff. This doesn't make me happy. And we had all the possessions we needed in this tiny little 80 square foot camper. Also, at that time, I had been writing my book. I'm a big believer in your actions speak louder than words. As I'm reading, I'm like, I can make my life even simpler. And it partly is just addicting, to be honest. It's just it's money, financial freedom, and the freedom to follow the jobs of our dreams. So that's something else we realized. We took the camper out to Colorado and scoped out the place, and we're actually going to be living on an organic farm, working with them on whatever adventure they choose to take, either farm to table or education classes or cooking classes. Or we have so many ideas out now just sort of floating around, and we're so excited because we would have never even had the thought to do it if we hadn't downsized. Because when you're in a big home, and I shouldn't say that, if you're living outside of your means, which we were doing, it's not the home, it was that the home was too big for us. And we actually got a home that was $200,000 less than what we qualified for. So I can't even imagine if people buy a home that they technically qualify for. And we didn't even have the time to think about what we wanted, because you go to college, you get married, you buy a house, have a kid, and you just follow this routine. And we were just like, well, I guess we're just going to work the rest of our lives to pay for this house. And then now that we know that there's other options out there, it's like, I have to share. I just feel like I have to share, because it's like, you don't have to be miserable. You don't have to work a job. Find your passion, follow your bliss, and money will follow. And that's sort of our new journey is, I get to do what I want now. I'm an author, and I get to work on an organic farm soon. And my husband, it's now his turn to follow his dream, which is another reason we're downsizing again, because that gives us even more financial freedom to do what we want to do.
It takes courage because, like you said, you were following the expectations. That's what you do. You go to college, you do this, blah, 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 blah. And to step out of that takes courage, I think. I don't want to just assume that. Did you get positive feedback or negative feedback from your family when you made that step?
No, you assumed correctly. Yeah. And we still have a family that's not 100% on board. And I understand that, because I have to admit, like you said, it did take courage, and we are still finding ourselves and finding our strength. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but at the same time, it's passionate. It's fun. We love it. And it takes time and effort, but it's not soul crushing like the work we were doing before. And I loved my job. Don't get me wrong. I loved my job, but I was so exhausted that my health was starting to fail. And I was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism because I was going 100% and never rested. And now I have time. I'm loving my life. I'm loving my job. I need to do a better job expressing it because, I'm always on to the next project. That's why we share our story, because our family see us when we're tired and we just need a rest. So much has happened in 1 year. Our whole lives have changed and we are so happy and so much more free, but it's definitely, I mean, it takes work, but we'll get there.
Of course, and every change takes work. But also, when I'm hearing you telling your story, I'm hearing a lot the financial part of it, that you're wanting to be or almost are debt free. And that's a luxury a lot of people don't have. And then if you live within your means or even below your income level, that also means you can save. And if you ever choose to go back to the bigger home for whatever reason, that option is open. It's not to say, oh, once you have chosen tiny home, it might be forever because you love it so much. But there's no compulsion. It doesn't, it doesn't say that now you never can live in a big home again. Actually, for some people, it might be the way to be able to live in a bigger home by being financially thoughtful and careful and really preparing themselves for whatever it is they want to do.
In our 20s, we didn't know any better, right? We have real jobs now, so we have money. And we didn't understand how to spend our money efficiently, especially when we started eating 100% organic. All of a sudden, we were still spending the same elsewhere. You aren't taught how to budget in school. You aren't taught how to be financially smart in school. And we had to learn the hard way. We're still paying off decisions we made in our early 20s. Now it's so freeing to know, like you said, like to have no debt and to actually save up for our next big purchase is going to be huge. I mean, just that shift in thinking, like I really shouldn't. I mean, of course, there's emergencies, like you need to eat and live and have shelter. But now we're understanding, like if I want a big purchase, I actually have to have the money first and not put it on a card.
Right. Well, and I think the key here too is you're not only being not taught how to manage money, it's actually bad for the economy if you're a good, well, it's not a good consumer. You're a bad consumer. You only consume when you can. The whole idea of we have to do more, I think brings hardship to a lot of individual lives, because I think debt is one of the biggest stress factors in people's life. I want to go back to downsizing more, but I want to address really quickly your book. So you said you're writing a book. Tell us more.
I had no idea that I would ever write something. That I was a gymnastics coach for 19 years. I was a teacher for 3 years and a daycare provider for 3 years. So I thought I would always work with children. And once we started living in a tiny house, I was just so inspired to share our stories, just giving people another option on how minimizing things in their lives can bring them the greatest joy. It's called the Minimalist Living for a Maximum Life. I go about how our minimalist lifestyle has healed our mind, body, soul because of, like I said, the newfound financial freedom has allowed us to actually think about our lives, what's meaningful to us. So I talk about, how to minimize clutter in your life, how to minimize toxins, how to minimize stressors, and how to, by maximizing your life, you're adding in healthy, nutritious food, you're adding in mindful practices. So giving people ideas on here's what worked for me and here's some other options that have worked for other people, what's going to work for you, and just sort of taking a step back and re-evaluating what your values are, and does your life reflect those values? Our former life was not reflect. I wanted it to be fully sustainable. I can't afford solar panels for our huge house. I can't afford geothermal for our home. We were barely making our mortgage payment. I couldn't add another mortgage on top of that. So I wanted my life to truly be an example of how I truly felt. For us, that was downsizing. And for others, it might just be getting the job of your dreams. It might be self-care. Whatever it is, the minimalist movement has taught me to follow my bliss, follow my passion. And I hope to inspire others to do the same, because like you said, we just kind of get in this rat race or this routine or what's expected of us. And we are all unique individuals. And if we can only heal the world if we are all true to ourselves and following our dreams.
Are you going to self-publish, or do you have a publisher, or how is that going to work?
I have a publisher and I'm in the editing phase. So they're hoping to get it out here around Christmas.
Nice. So when that happens, you have to send us links and
yeah.
so we can.
I'll send you a free copy.
Cool. Oh, did you guys hear it? holding you to it.
Please do.
Excellent. Now you're downsizing more to, you said 125 square feet?
Yeah. Yeah, so our tiny house right now is 325, and then the RV we'll be getting that's just temporary is going to be around 100 square feet. And then we will be building a tiny house there in Colorado that's going to be probably around 150 square feet.
And are you using a construction person again?
I'm hoping to just manifest people who actually know how to build, and it won't be a rush like it was last time, so we can work on it for a couple of years. Yeah, I'm really hoping this time we can actually be part of it. And we were very thoughtful about this design, but now that we've lived in campers and RVs, I want to be even more thoughtful and more crafty, and the bed will be a table, the table will also be a bench, or who knows, just really everything's going to be like 3-in-1.
I saw a video, and maybe I can find it and link it to our blog post here, of a lady, I think she was in Barcelona, tiny little apartment, and she had a full-size bathtub, which was also the table, and just a lot of ideas. And it seems now you have lived the tiny lifestyle for a while, so you know much better. Before you came from the theory, from thinking that's what we want, and now you lived it, so you can approach it from knowing, from experience. So I'm curious to see how your design will be different.
It is interesting, though, because honestly, our build will depend on how well my book sells, because to make a tiny house pullable, the best thing to do is make it steel frame, which is also the most hyperallergenic. So it's a win-win, but it's also triple as expensive. I'm banking on the book selling so we can make a non-toxic tiny house again.
How much more expensive? Do you have any figures in mind? What would be a steel frame cost, ballpark?
All I've heard, you're going to about triple the cost. I'm not sure how much our lumber was, but I know it adds about $2,000 per se. I mean, that was just an example of what our contractor said. So
interesting. Now, your current tiny home, you're going to sell it?
Well, yes, we're hoping to sell it. I'm like going to tear up now. We were crying. I guess I was crying. My husband was sad, but it was my baby. I designed it to be a forest and designed it. It was in a really good place spiritually. And I was just like, this is my baby. This is my design. It's like, it makes me so happy. Everything about it makes me happy. And there's so much lighting and air, and it's just, it's going to be really hard. So we're actually being pretty picky about who will get it next, because we want to make sure that they'll appreciate it and it's not going to end up just being sold again and again and again. We want somebody to be able to really enjoy this.
So people would contact you and say, hey, can I get on the list?
There's not a whole lot of people in line, because all the television shows are saying that these cost $30,000 to $40,000. But when you have a custom build that's non-toxic, it adds up quick. And so people see our price point and they're like, but the show says it's only $30,000 or $40,000. And I was like, yeah, but that's not including the washer, the fridge, the stove, the composting toilet. I mean, the composting toilet alone is over $1,000. So all those things add up really quick.
Oh, yeah. And you would think people which are serious understand that.
Oh, yeah. And we have cork flooring in our tiny house, which is sustainable and non-toxic. And oh my gosh, it was triple what the linoleum or something would cost. It was over $100,000 to build. We want to be fair for sure, but we put a lot of heart and soul into it. And it's only a year old, so. But yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, it's expensive. It's a home. I think that's the thing, is it's a home on wheels. It's not like an RV where it's just some aluminum and some like tacky plywood. I mean, it's literally, it's sturdy.
Yeah, it seems sad if you have to lose money on it. In the ideal world, you get a buyer who understands. Emily, is there some else you would like to share? Some we haven't touched on?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, because I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and I'm just so thankful that there's women out there, sharing sustainability and self-care. And I just love the mix. So I just wanted to say thank you, and keep doing what you're doing, because the message needs to get out. I just have a big passion, especially for women. I think we're coming into our power now in this day and age. And I think the more of us that can speak up, I think women heal the world, because we're raising the children, we're raising the next generation. And if we're truly healed ourselves, and obviously we can't be 100% because we live in a toxic world, but we can be really dang close to 100%. And I think if we can treat ourselves with respect and love, then our kids will grow up understanding that the world is a wonderful place. And you've been inspiring so many and a positive message. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your positive message. Me, I have a lot of appreciation for homeschoolers. I homeschool my kids as well.
Oh.
And I just feel being a mom is the most important job in the world. Like you said, I mean, moms are raising the next generation, and the job we do directly reflects what else is going to happen in the world. The happier and whole people are, the more they can act from their heart and not out of fear. So thank you. Thank you. Right back to you.
Yes, thank you. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Did Emily inspire you to start getting rid of some stuff you might not be using anymore? To really look at each item and say, hey, do I want you in my life or do I not want you in my life? It did that for me, and it's certainly one of my goals to see what is giving me joy and what is giving me work without getting much value back. Let us know what you think. Are you thinking about moving to a smaller space, or are you thinking of wanting a bigger space? We never know. Let us know. sustainablelivingpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can see us on Instagram, Facebook. This is probably where we are the most active. Leave us a message. I want to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, which are our patrons. And we have a new patron this month. Her name is Tatiana Sinetskaya. I'm sorry, I probably said your name completely wrong. I think Tatiana I got right. Thank you so much for being one of our supporters. All of you are the ones which make this show possible. Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for listening. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.